My name is Avery Collins. I'm 34 years old, and the first thing my 8-year-old daughter heard at Christmas dinner was my sister saying, "You should leave and never return." She didn't even raise her voice when she said it. That was the part that made it worse. She said it while reaching for the cranberry sauce like she was asking someone to pass the salt. Then my mother looked straight at me, glanced at my daughter for half a second, and added, "Christmas is so much better without you." The room didn't explode. Nobody gasped. My father didn't pound the table. Christmas music was still playing softly from a speaker in the living room. Some old playlist with sleigh bells and warm voices pretending families like mine were full of grace. My daughter froze beside me, both hands under the table, shoulders folded in so tightly it looked like she was trying to disappear inside her holiday dress. That was the moment something in me stopped bleeding and turned to stone. I didn't beg. I didn't remind them that I'd buried my husband 6 months earlier. I didn't point out that I had shown up anyway carrying a casserole in one hand and my last bit of hope in the other because I wanted my little girl to have one normal Christmas after the kind of year that changes a child forever. I just looked at my sister, then at my mother and said, "Then you won't mind me doing this." 5 minutes later, the same people who had thrown us out were chasing me into the cold, begging me to take it back. Before I tell you what I did and why they went from smug to panicked before I even reached my car, tell me what time it is, where you are, and where you're watching from. I always wonder how far stories like this travel. My daughter's name is Harper, and by 8 years old, she had already learned the kind of emotional math children should never have to learn. She knew which rooms were safe, which adults got louder after their second glass of wine, and how to sit perfectly still when tension began moving across a room like static before a storm. She learned all of that in the 6 months after my husband Ryan died on I-75 when a delivery truck crossed 2 lanes in the rain and crushed the driver's side of his SUV. The official language used words like negligence, pending claim, liability review. My life used words like funeral, rent, fever medicine, and keep breathing for your child. Ryan had been the kind of man who made ordinary things feel steady. He packed Harper's lunch in neat little rows, remembered library due dates, and turned Christmas lights into a full afternoon ritual with hot chocolate and a ladder he never trusted me on. After he died, our duplex outside Atlanta felt too quiet in the mornings and too loud in my head at night. I worked freelance as a designer, branding packages for small businesses, church bulletins, local bakery menus, whatever paid on time. Some months I felt capable. Some months I felt like I was one late invoice away from panic. The lawsuit from Ryan's death dragged for months, and I told almost nobody about it because grief draws sympathy, but money draws appetite. My family had always been hungry in that particular way. My mother, Diane, liked to describe herself as generous, which in practice meant she loved giving advice no one asked for and keeping score on every favor. My father, Richard, hid behind silence so often that by the time I was an adult, I understood his quiet wasn't peace. It was permission. My older sister Lauren had been the golden child for as long as I could remember. The one with the good hair, the perfect smile, the church volunteer image, the talent for sounding concerned while aiming a knife. Her husband Kyle had bounced from one big opportunity to another for years: real estate, short-term rentals, a landscaping partnership, then some half-baked home services startup that mostly consumed money and produced excuses. 3 winters earlier, Lauren had called me in tears saying they were behind on daycare and one mortgage payment, and she just needed a bridge. I wired her $2,000 from the tax refund Ryan and I had been saving for Harper's school fund. I never saw a cent back. A year after that, my parents needed help with a second mortgage they swore was temporary. Then there were the small things: utility shut-off threats, medical co-pays. "Can you just cover this till Friday?" All wrapped in family language designed to make refusal sound like cruelty. So when the settlement money finally moved, I kept it quiet. I didn't celebrate. I didn't buy a car. I didn't post anything. I kept shopping at Publix with coupons and driving Ryan's old SUV with the cracked console and the pine tree air freshener Harper insisted still smelled like him. But I made a terrible mistake. I hoped. I hoped that maybe this Christmas, if I helped them in a real way, something in the family would soften. Maybe my parents would stop talking to me like I was the cautionary tale at the edge of every family gathering. Maybe Lauren would stop measuring my worth by what I could absorb without complaining. Maybe Harper would get one holiday that felt ordinary. So I prepared 3 thick envelopes, one for my parents, one for Lauren and Kyle, and one that covered a smaller emergency fund I had meant to set aside for the things families say they never ask for and always do. 2 days before Christmas, Lauren texted the family thread, "Dinner at 6 o'clock, don't be late." A minute later, she messaged me privately, "Please don't make things awkward this year." My mother sent her own version that night. "Just be pleasant, Avery. Harper deserves a peaceful Christmas." That message sat in my chest like a warning label. On Christmas Eve, Harper came home from school with a construction paper ornament and a winter break packet from her teacher. I helped her tape the ornament to our fridge, while a flyer from my parents' church Christmas service lay on the counter next to my car keys. I remember thinking that everything looked so normal. It was suspicious. When we reached my parents' house in Roswell, the leftovers of Black Friday still lived in their garage. Flattened TV boxes, plastic wreath bins, a Costco wrapping paper tower against the wall. From the street, the house looked warm, expensive, American in the most postcard way. Inside, the air felt like performance. My mother hugged Lauren's kids until they squealed, then gave Harper a smile that cooled the room by 10 degrees. My father asked me how freelance was going and the tone people use when they already assume the answer is unstable. Kyle clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Still making those cute little logos?" Harper moved closer to my side without saying a word. An hour later, while bringing in ice from the garage, I walked through the kitchen and saw a torn envelope with attorney letterhead in the trash. It wasn't my lawyer's exact stationery, but it was close enough to make my stomach go cold. When I slipped it out and unfolded the top half, my mother appeared so fast she nearly dropped the serving tray in her hands. "That's junk," she said too quickly. "Throw it away." Junk mail doesn't make women like my mother panic. I folded the paper and slid it into my coat pocket beside the envelopes. 10 minutes after that, in the hallway outside my father's office, I heard Lauren whisper to Kyle, "Tonight we close it. Don't let her leave without agreeing." I looked through the cracked office door and saw papers laid out neatly on my father's desk, with a pen placed across the top. My family hadn't invited me to Christmas. They had staged an ambush and dressed it in holly and ribbon. By the time we all sat down to dinner, the whole house smelled like roasted turkey, brown sugar ham, cinnamon candles, and the sharp edge of something rotten nobody wanted to name yet. My mother had gone full Southern holiday spread, green bean casserole, sweet potato souffle with toasted marshmallows, deviled eggs, homemade rolls under a linen towel, cranberry sauce still ridged from the can because tradition matters selectively in that house. A Frank Sinatra Christmas song played low from the kitchen speaker. Kyle poured himself bourbon before Grace, which told me he thought the night was already won. Harper sat to my right in her red cardigan, knees together, hands folded so politely it made me ache. Across from me, Lauren looked radiant in that polished suburban way that depends on expensive teeth and the confidence of someone who has rarely faced consequences. She had one hand around her wine glass and one eye on me, the way a chess player watches the piece she expects to corner first. My father carved the turkey with grim concentration. My mother said grace too loudly, thanking God for family, healing, abundance, and the blessing of being together. And if hypocrisy had weight, the table would have collapsed under the dishes. I barely tasted my food. Every nerve in me was listening. Harper kept glancing toward the hallway like she had memorized the route to the front door. I put my hand lightly over hers under the table. She relaxed for 1 second, then tensed again when Lauren set down her fork and said, "Before dessert, we actually need to settle something." The room obeyed her instantly. That was always the family dynamic. Lauren declared, and the rest of them rearranged themselves around her certainty. My mother dabbed her lips with a napkin and angled her body toward me. My father didn't look up, but he didn't object either. Kyle leaned back and folded his arms like the entertainment was starting. "Settle what?" I asked, keeping my voice level for Harper's sake. Lauren gave me a sympathetic smile that would have looked kind to a stranger. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be," she said. "Mom and Dad aren't getting any younger. Kyle and I are stretched thin. Everybody knows you came into money from Ryan's claim, and I think we all agree it would be wrong for you to sit on that while the rest of the family is drowning. There it was. No transition. No shame. My mother jumped in before I could answer. We're not asking for extravagance, she said, which is exactly what people say before asking for extravagance. Just fairness. Family takes care of family. Family, Kyle added, swirling his drink, doesn't hoard while other people lose homes. My eyes went to my father. He kept cutting turkey. Slice, pause, slice. He looked like a man studying meat grain, not a father watching his widowed daughter get cornered at Christmas dinner. You went through my mail, I said quietly. My mother inhaled like I had offended her. Lauren's face hardened for half a second, then smoothed again. Don't be dramatic, she said. We saw enough to know what this is. You have more than you need, Avery. More than I need. My husband's death reduced to surplus. I felt heat climb my throat, but Harper was beside me, and I refused to let them turn me into the unstable one in front of her. I'm not discussing money at this table, I said. Not tonight, and not in front of my daughter. My mother gave a tiny laugh. Oh, now you care about what children hear? That landed exactly how she intended. Harper's fingers locked around mine. Lauren leaned forward. No one is trying to upset her, she said, using the sugary voice she reserved for maximum cruelty. We're trying to be practical. Mom and Dad are behind. Kyle and I are trying to save our house, and you're acting like your grief makes you exempt from basic decency. I remember every detail of the next 10 seconds in unnatural clarity. The clink of my father's knife against the platter, the glow of the tree in the next room reflecting in the sliding glass door, a child's laugh from outside where Lauren's sons were playing with plastic reindeer antlers they'd been given before Harper even arrived, the cranberry stain on Lauren's plate shaped like a sideways heart. And then, because cruelty gets bolder when it senses silence, Lauren shrugged and said, If you're going to sit there and act selfish after everything this family has done for you, maybe you should just leave. I stared at her. Excuse me? She met my eyes fully now, her expression clean and cold. You should leave, she repeated, and never return. My mother didn't even hesitate. She set down her fork, looked straight at me, then passed me at Harper and said, Christmas is so much better without you. Time did something strange then. It didn't stop. It stretched. I could hear, somewhere in my head, a memory of Ryan and laughing the year before as he untangled lights on our porch while Harper bounced in boots 2 sizes too big, shouting that the red bulbs were her favorites. I saw Harper last spring in the funeral home hallway clutching my hand and asking whether heaven had school buses. I saw every moment I had swallowed an insult to keep peace around people who did not deserve the effort. And in the middle of all that, my daughter went very still. Not crying, not protesting, just still in the way children get when they are watching adults decide whether they belong. I looked at my father one last time, giving him the chance he had never once taken in all my life. Say something. Stop this. Act like the title dad means anything. He lifted his eyes to mine for maybe 1 second, then lowered them to his plate. Approved. That was all the silence meant. Approved. I put down my fork. Very gently, I turned to Harper and said, Sweetheart, go get your coat and your backpack. She slid out of her chair immediately. No confusion. No why. Just relief. That hurt more than my mother's line ever could. Harper had already been waiting for permission to escape. Lauren exhaled and leaned back as if a meeting item had been resolved. Good, she said. Kyle smirked into his bourbon. My mother made a little dismissive motion with her napkin. Don't make a scene on the way out, she said. And that was the moment something in me settled. Not rage, not hysteria, precision. I stood up, looked at my sister, looked at my mother and said, Then you won't mind me doing this. I walked into the kitchen so calmly that at first none of them followed. They thought I was going to cry in private or grab my purse or maybe say something wounded and dramatic they could later mock in the family group chat. Instead, I reached into the upper cabinet beside the holiday serving trays, where earlier that evening I had tucked the envelopes after realizing dinner might turn ugly. I laid them out on the counter in a neat line. 3 thick cream envelopes, each with a name written in black ink. Diane and Richard, Lauren and Kyle. Emergency. The room changed temperature the second Lauren stepped into the doorway and saw them. "What is that?" she asked. And for the first time all night, her voice sounded unscripted. My mother came in right behind her, then Kyle, then finally my father, who suddenly found his feet now that money had become visible. Harper stood in the hallway in her coat, backpack on, watching with those solemn eyes that made me stand straighter. I placed my hand over the first envelope. "This," I said, "was $41,000 to clear Mom and Dad's home equity line, the credit card balances you've all been pretending don't exist, and the back property taxes Dad keeps calling a paperwork delay." My mother's face went white so fast it looked powdered. My father took one involuntary step forward. I moved to the second envelope. "This was $62,000, I said, looking at Lauren now. "To stop the foreclosure notices, catch up the mortgage, pay off the private loan Kyle took for his latest business idea, and keep your boys from having to switch schools after New Year's." Kyle's smirk vanished like it had been wiped off with a cloth. Lauren made a tiny sound in the back of her throat, not yet a sob, more like greed colliding with terror. I tapped the third envelope. "And this one," I said, "was $15,000 in a separate emergency reserve because every time one of you says, 'We don't need much,' it somehow turns into another crisis by Friday." Nobody spoke. Even the music from the other room seemed to go quiet. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. "Avery," she whispered, suddenly fragile in the exact theatrical way she had weaponized all my life. "If this is some kind of test—" "It was a gift," I cut in. "That's what makes this so simple." I slid the first envelope out, opened it, and pulled free the signed cashier's check and the bank letter from my attorney explaining how the funds would be released in the morning. Then, while all 4 of them watched, I tore the documents cleanly in half. The sound was softer than I expected. It still landed like a gunshot. "No," my mother gasped, taking a step toward me. I lifted the second set of papers. Lauren's hands flew to her mouth. "Avery, stop," she said, her composure cracking wide open now. "Don't be ridiculous." I looked straight at her and ripped that set too, slowly enough for her to understand what she was losing. Kyle lunged as if he could snatch the pages out of the air, but my father put out an arm too late, and Kyle ended up grabbing nothing. I held the last envelope between both hands. "5 minutes ago," I said, "you told my daughter Christmas was better without us." I tore the final documents into narrow strips and let them fall onto the kitchen island like confetti at the world's ugliest party. My mother made a broken noise I had never heard from her before. Lauren started crying for real now, mascara already threatening at the corners. Kyle muttered, "Jesus Christ," under his breath as if I were the disaster in the room. My father finally found language. "You can't do that," he snapped. "Redo them. Tomorrow. Tonight. Whatever it takes." I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because the audacity of him commanding me after that table scene was almost magnificent. "Oh, I absolutely can," I said, "and I just did." I crossed the room to Harper, took her hand, and headed for the front door. That was when panic fully bloomed. My mother grabbed my arm and then thought better of it when I turned on her. Lauren rushed after me saying, my boys," as if motherhood were a trump card only she held. Kyle shouted that I was vindictive and unstable. My father kept barking orders because helpless men often confuse volume with authority. I didn't answer any of them. Harper and I stepped into the December cold, and the air hit my face like a baptism. By the time I got her into the passenger seat, the front door flew open behind us, and all of them spilled onto the porch. My mother was crying openly now. Lauren came barefoot across the driveway, hair blowing loose, shouting, "Please, Avery, please just fix it. We didn't mean it like that." Kyle's voice followed, suddenly stripped of swagger. "Come on, don't throw away your family over one fight." My father stood at the edge of the walkway, face gray, and called, You stop this right now. None of them asked how Harper was. Not one. They begged for money with my child sitting 6 feet away, hearing every word. I buckled her seatbelt, got behind the wheel, and started the engine while their voices rose into each other in a panicked knot. My mother ran to my window, hands clasped like she was praying. "Undo it," she cried. "Please undo it." I rolled the window down just enough to speak. "You already told us who at your table," I said. "Now you can live with it." Then I drove away with my daughter beside me and 4 silhouettes shrinking in the mirror under a roof full of lights they could no longer afford. I hadn't planned on spending Christmas Eve in a hotel off Highway 400, but grief teaches you that the worst nights of your life rarely arrive with a packing list. Harper sat quietly through the drive, backpack in her lap, staring out at brake lights smeared by mist. She didn't ask if we were going home because home had been supposed to be my parents' guest room that night. A pull-out sofa for me, the little room with the quilt for her, pancakes and stockings in the morning, the performance of family, if not the substance. Instead, I pulled into a Marriott near the interstate because it was clean, bright, and had a lobby tree with warm white lights that didn't feel hostile. The woman at the front desk offered Harper hot chocolate without making it sound like pity. That nearly undid me. In the elevator, Harper leaned into my side so lightly most people wouldn't have noticed, but I felt it like a plea. Our room had 2 beds, a humming heater, and curtains that never fully closed. I set our bags down, took off her shoes, and told her she could change out of the dress. She peeled it off like she was removing a costume she never wanted to wear. 20 minutes later, she sat cross-legged on one of the beds in leggings, and Ryan's old oversized Falcons t-shirt I kept for her as a sleep shirt. We split vending machine pretzels and watched the end of a Christmas movie with the sound too low. My phone would not stop vibrating. Calls from my mother, calls from Lauren, calls from my father, which shocked me more than the others because men like him save words for when they think money is leaving the room. There were texts, too. First frantic, then manipulative, then furious. "You misunderstood. Harper shouldn't have heard that. You know how your sister gets. Don't punish the kids. We can talk numbers." Numbers. Even then, they said numbers before apology. When Harper finally looked at me and asked, "Does Grandma not like me?" The room got so quiet I could hear the ice machine down the hall. Every instinct in me wanted to tell a protective lie. "Of course she does, sweetheart. Adults just say dumb things when they're stressed. But kids know when you lie to make yourself feel better." So I told the truth in the gentlest form I could. "What Grandma said was wrong." I said, "What Aunt Lauren said was wrong too. None of it was because of you." Harper picked at the hotel blanket for a while, then said, "She hugs the other kids first every time." I swallowed. "I know." "And when she says my name," Harper added, not crying, just thinking, "It sounds like she already wants me to move." That sentence lodged in my chest like shrapnel. I sat beside her and pulled her into my lap, even though she was getting long and heavy in that in-between age where children still fit, but not for much longer. "Listen to me," I whispered into her hair. "You never have to shrink to make cruel people comfortable, ever." She was quiet for a beat. Then she said the most devastating thing anyone said to me that Christmas. "But you always do." She wasn't accusing me. She was observing a pattern. Kids are little anthropologists inside their own homes. They map where power sits, who apologizes first, whose feelings matter most, whose pain gets turned into inconvenience. And my daughter had been watching me swallow myself around my family for years. I held her tighter and told her I was sorry. Not vague parent sorry, real sorry. Sorry I let you hear that. Sorry I kept hoping they would become better people if I was patient enough. Sorry I showed you peacekeeping when I should have shown you boundaries. She nodded into my shoulder like some part of her had been waiting for me to say it. Later, after she fell asleep sprawled sideways across the bed with a candy cane still on the nightstand, I finally answered one of the calls. I put it on speaker and kept my voice low. My mother burst into tears the second she heard me. "Where are you? Is Harper okay?" That concern lasted all of 3 seconds before the real topic pushed through. You need to fix this, Avery. Your father is beside himself. Lauren is hysterical. My father took the phone next and sounded exactly like a man furious that consequences had entered the house through a door he believed he controlled. This has gone far enough, he said. You are not going to wreck everyone's future over one heated conversation. Lauren's voice appeared in the background, sharp as broken glass. Tell her to stop acting like a victim. I stared at Harper sleeping and felt all the soft, self-betraying parts of me go still. You told my child to leave and never come back, I said. Mom said Christmas was better without us. Snorts. You don't get to call that heated. You call that final. My mother started crying harder. My father said I was being dramatic. Kyle shouted something about pride, and I understood then that none of them were sorry for the wound. They were sorry the money had walked out with the person they had just humiliated. No, I said, when they demanded again that I redo the checks. The word came out so calm it surprised even me. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not after what Harper heard. Then I hung up, set the phone face down, and watched the blinking numbers of the hotel alarm clock until exhaustion finally won. Christmas morning, Harper and I ate waffles from the complimentary breakfast and opened the emergency stocking stuffers I'd bought earlier that week and hidden in my tote bag just in case. A coloring book, fuzzy socks, a chapter book about a brave girl in a snowstorm. Not the Christmas I planned, but when Harper laughed at the tiny syrup cups and said the hotel waffle maker looked like a robot, I realized something important. Peace can be shabby and still be holy. When Harper and I got home, my family had already started shaping the story before I could even take off my coat. Lauren posted online about boundaries, grief, and family pain, painting me as the selfish widow who refused to help after receiving Ryan's settlement. She left out the part where she told me and my daughter to leave and never come back. She left out my mother's words completely. I didn't argue emotionally. I answered with facts. I posted one calm statement explaining exactly what happened at Christmas dinner and attached proof of the money I had quietly sent my parents over the years. Within hours, their version began to crack. Relatives started asking why a child had been thrown out. Church friends stopped commenting with blind sympathy. My mother texted first, then my father, then Lauren, all suddenly desperate to handle this privately. I ignored every demand and saved every message. 2 days later, they showed up at my house with a cake and fake apologies. I didn't let them in. Through the doorbell camera, Lauren slipped and threatened to tell people I was unstable from grief if I kept exposing them. That one sentence gave me everything I needed. I saved the footage, had my attorney send a formal no-contact warning, and for the first time in my life, I stopped defending myself and started protecting my peace. The fallout came slowly, but it came hard. Without my help, my parents could no longer keep their house, and within months they sold it and moved into a small apartment. Lauren and Kyle lost their home too, after debts and bad choices finally caught up with them. The same people who once looked down on me were suddenly struggling to hold together the image they had built for years. Harper and I moved forward instead. I bought a modest home, secured her future, and built the kind of stable life Ryan would have wanted for us. The greatest change was in Harper. She laughed more, spoke more freely, and no longer looked like she needed permission to exist in a room. A year later, when my mother tried to approach her at a school event, Harper calmly said, "I don't go where I'm unwanted anymore." I felt no triumph in that moment, only clarity. My family did not lose me because of money. They lost me because they showed my daughter that love in their house was conditional. If this story means anything, it is this. Being related by blood does not give anyone the right to humiliate you, and protecting your child is never cruelty. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is walk away from the table and never sit there again. We hope this story gave you both emotion and something meaningful to think about. This video is completely fictional and intended only for entertainment, education, and storytelling value. If there is one lesson to take away, it is that people who take your kindness for granted should never be allowed to make you feel guilty for choosing yourself, your peace, and your own future.